Thank you, choir, for your message and song. And Risa, I really want to thank you for that special In the Garden melody this morning. It really spoke to my heart. And it reminded me of an experience that I had when I was 9 years old. When I was 9 years old, my mom and dad told me on a Sunday afternoon after we had gone to church and had our going to Riceville Beach. I got all excited. I thought we were going to go swimming. But that wasn't the occasion on that day. She said, we're going to a funeral service. I said, a funeral service? Yes, she said. And then she told me this story. On the south side of Riceville Beach, there's an inlet, a very dangerous inlet. The currents in and out of that inlet are sometimes so treacherous that even a small boat has difficulty navigating it. On a Friday afternoon, before that Sunday, two little boys were at that inlet playing ball, tossing a little rubber ball back and forth. And one of the little boys was close to the water and the other was back up on the beach. And the one that was back on the beach threw the ball too hard and it went over the little boy's head that was near the inlet and out into the turbulent waters. Without even thinking, the little boy jumped out after the ball, and he went under and was never seen again. At the funeral service at the inlet, a large crowd had gathered. And I remember the lifeguards had a big, beautiful wreath, probably bigger than this podium, and they took it out into the waters in the approximate place where the other little boy said that his friend went down. That experience at that funeral that afternoon made a difference in my life. I didn't know the little boy. My mom knew the parents. But the whole time that we were going back home after that funeral service, a prominent thought kept filling my mind. And the thought was this: that little boy that I did not know gave his life for a rubber ball. And the message that has been with me all these years was this: for what will I give my life? For what are you giving your life? What have you given your life for all these years that God has given you? Something so trivial as a rubber ball? Something so trivial as something material that is here for a little while and gone? Something that when you pass from this life to the next, you can't take with you? How many people are giving their life for the trivial things? I want to talk about that this morning in the light of a father's discovery about life. Life is a process. It's a process of growing and developing and discovering who we are and what our purpose for being in this world really is. You could go through the history list of the Old Testament and look at some of the principal characters of the Old Testament, like Moses, for example. Moses grew up in an Egyptian palace. Moses grew up in wealth. Moses grew up in affluence. Moses grew up with almost anything he would desire to be his. And when he was growing up in that environment, you can just imagine Moses had no idea that God's purpose for his life would be something so different. That God's purpose for his life would be to lead the children of Israel, the Hebrew children, out of a bondage situation, back to the land of Canaan, the promised land. In those early days, Moses did not know that purpose, but he discovered it. There was a young shepherd boy who just went to check on his brothers one day who were engaged in battle. And he got down there, and this big giant named Goliath was taunting the Israelite forces, and nobody had enough courage to go out and face this giant. And this young boy who just came on the scene saw what was happening, and he said, well, I'll go fight him. And David picked up a smooth stone from a riverbed and killed the enemy, killed Goliath. But even then, David did not have in his mind, I am sure, that his purpose in life was not just killing a giant. His purpose in life was to be a king of all Israel. In the New Testament, there was a man who delighted in persecuting Christians. He had no inkling of an idea that his purpose in life was not to persecute and kill Christians, but his purpose in life was to save souls for Jesus Christ. And Paul had that dramatic transformation of life on the Damascus Road and found his purpose, that for which he would literally give his life, spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ. Who among us this morning in our younger days could have imagined the journey that life would bring to us? And some of you are still in the early stages of that life this morning. What will life bring to you? What will you do with what God has given you? For what purpose will you live? Will you live for something that is just tangible? I remember a man told me one day, a lawyer told me that his whole purpose was to make $1 million. That was his purpose in life. What if you gain the whole world, lose your soul? What if you spend your whole life on the material side of life, getting and hoarding up? What have you got when you leave? What is the purpose of your life? What are you living for? Life is filled with discoveries and adventures and changes and transformations never dreamed about. What is God doing in your life this morning? What is He teaching you? What does He want you to be and do? On this Father's Day, for the next few moments, I want to direct our attention to Solomon in the Old Testament. Solomon was the second son of David and Bathsheba. Their first son, you remember, died. When Solomon was born, Nathan the prophet gave him a name, Jedediah. You wonder where they get names for Star Wars and all that stuff. Jedediah, friend of God, man of peace. That's what his name meant. Solomon grew up to be king of Israel, the first to build the temple in Jerusalem. He's said to be the wisest man that ever lived, but you know, you got to question a man who's got 700 wives and 300 concubines. As the little boy said, 700 wives and 300 cucumbers. And it was through his marriages that he made these foreign alliances. And that was sort of his spiritual downfall, because he built altars for these pagan women that he married. The Bible says he has 3 sons. Now, can you imagine 3 sons out of 700 wives? We don't really know. I think the Bible just sort of falls short in letting us know how many children Solomon had. We don't know. But I can tell you it probably wasn't 3. But the Bible names Rehoboam, the son who became king after Solomon. And he names 2 daughters, Tapatha and Basmath. Y'all looking for new names? It's inconceivable to think that Solomon didn't have any more children. But anyway, Solomon reigned in a time that was virtually a peaceful time, in great contrast to the reign of his father, a tumultuous reign of violence and conflict and conquering and warfare. He's accredited to writing perhaps 3 books of the Old Testament that we enjoy: the Song of Songs, the book of Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. He had a reign of at least 40 years, and pretty good reign. But Solomon had his personal flaws, and yet he was blessed with unique wisdom. God gave him that. And let me put a little parenthesis here about life. Our discoveries in life come in a variety of ways. Sometimes they come through the school of hard knocks. We know that, don't we? There have been some hard knocks in a major portion of our lives. And because we are human beings and we seem to be so hard-headed at times and so stubborn at times, many of the lessons that we learn through hard knocks are learned the painful way, and so we call it the school of hard knocks. That's one way. Another is the school of observation. It is by carefully observing the lives of others and trying to model our lives after theirs that we sort of focus our attention. And then there's the school of trial and error. The school of trial and error. One of the memorable delights of our travels, Gloria and I, in traveling, a couple of years ago we went down to Fort Myers, Florida. If you've not been there, it's a beautiful city. There's 2 significant homes there. There's probably many more, but there are 2 really significant historical homes there. They're the summer homes of Henry Ford, the inventor of the car, and Thomas Edison, the inventor of about everything. And we thoroughly enjoyed going to those homes, and we thoroughly enjoyed going to the museum and enjoying the big river that runs in front of their homes. The interesting thing about both of these men is they got where they got in their success through trial and error. Edison did not see failure as failure. He saw failure as a stepping stone. For instance, he tried 10,000 experiments before he got to the light bulb. And somebody asked him about it, and he said, "I haven't failed." He just said, I found 9,999 ways that it wouldn't work. Michael Jordan lost 300 ball games, missed over 9,000 shots, and failed to make the winning shot in 26 of the games where the ball was handed to him to score in the last seconds. His shooting average was just a little below 50%, and yet he's recognized as the greatest basketball player of all time. Well, Solomon had his failures, but he had his successes. And he explored life. He explored life on every dimension that you could possibly think of. He pursued wisdom and knowledge, and concluded that there was much grief and increased pain in achieving it. He tried all the avenues of pleasure and possessions and determined that it was all futile and unprofitable. He said the certainty of death for both the wise man and the fool was the same, purposelessness. He said that labor and its fruits were to be found grievous and empty. You might say that Solomon experienced Everything that a person could experience, human wisdom, pleasure, wealth, oppression, work, political success, false worship, hoarded riches, on and on you could go. And what did he say? What was his conclusion? Vanity of vanities. The striving after wind with no profit under the sun. Now, you and I might be prone to argue that point. But if you read Solomon to the conclusion, you find out his great discovery as a man, as a father, as a king. His great discovery was, we are to enjoy the life that God has given us. We are to grow and develop as much as we possibly can. We are to use the potential that we have for the good of others. But his bottom line is this: it is not what you have in life that really counts. It's not what you achieve in life that really counts. It's what has you. And who has you? When Solomon researched every aspect of life, he said, now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it's good or evil. So Solomon really came to a conclusion. While we are to pursue and while we are to develop our potentials and our gifts on this earth, it's all vanity unless it is done in the context of our lives devoted to God and God's purposes. We need people in every profession. We need people to study hard and to tone their skills for the good of the world. But it needs to be done in the context of a faith in God, of a relationship with God, or else it's futile. The man who pleases God is the one who gets the full reward. The man who does not please God loses it to someone else, Solomon says. And the point is, do we want the full reward that God offers to us because we have a relationship with Him, or we just want to live for ourselves and lose it all, or pass it on to somebody else who might lose it all? There's a day of judgment. I think about that little boy. He didn't get to live out his life, but what happened to him helped me. And what happened to him gives us all a lesson of life. For what are we giving our lives? Is it something as trivial as a rubber ball, a material thing? Or is it for something that will last for eternity? Something that will bless God and His work for eternity. That's the message this morning for not just the fathers and the men of this congregation, but for all of us. Have you discovered the purpose of your life? We're going to stand and sing our hymn of invitation. We're going to sing the first and the last stanzas. Number 457. Lord, be glorified. And may that be our prayer and our decision this morning, that God would be glorified through our lives. May we stand as we sing.